here of the church's building. The church was actually founded in 1772, and they had a small building that they used over at the corner of Purchase Street and Cedar Street, right on the Dighton-Rehoboth line. But they came here and built this building. Total cost, those that are curious about such things, just a little under $2,000 in 1796. It was originally built with just the A roof, no belfry, and no bell tower on the building. The tower and the bell went up in 1906. I understand there was a large elm tree just the other side of the street here from the church, and at the time they put the bell up, they used a yoke of oxen and chain falls to get that 2,000-pound bell lifted right across the street and up into the bell tower there. The outside the building has not changed very much at all through the last 125 or 30 years, but in 1850s they went from a double galley floor inside with double windows on the outside to the single long windows on the long sides, and the windows in the rear and front of the building remain the same. On the front is what we call a double Christian door. About 25 years ago, Roy Horton, who I had served a carpentry apprenticeship with, and I put in 12 over 12 stacks back in the building, which pictures I might show you a little later, you'll see back in the 1850s, they were the windows within the building. They'd gone to 2 over 1 probably at the turn of the century, but we went back, we got the old lantern there, we had the door handmade, double Christian door. And other than clapboarding and some repairs, new roofs on the building, it's remained pretty much the same over the last 30 years. The hurricanes have spared us any major damage, and let's just try to keep the old building in shape. It's called a horse block. We don't have to look in a book to see that it was placed here in 1796. It's inscribed here into the stone. A horse block was that which was used to let the ladies step off the horse-drawn carriages on a Sunday morning in their long dresses and hoops and things, and they were then helped off the large stone here by a gentleman, their gentleman, or another gentleman in the front of the church. As we pan away, you'll see it's very large. As part of our celebration this year on the 18th and 19th of Sunday after Mother's Day, we're going to have parishioners dressed in the period costume of the 17 and 1800s, and we're going to have a wagon, a horse-drawn wagon, bring many of the folks to church on that morning. That should be an exciting time. And we're having a celebration at that time, a Friday night, a Saturday night, we're having a supper, ham and bean supper, and a rededication of the church at that time, the 200th anniversary of the building of this building. And Saturday morning we're having a guest pastor come in, and he will be speaking of the historical significance of the building. Again, I might not have mentioned before, this was built as a meeting house. The difference between a meeting house and a church was that it was used for secular as well as religious things. But during the 1850s, at the time, they changed a bit of the building inside. They made change to its use, and it was strictly a building used for religious purposes. The west entrance, the only entrance to the church, we're standing inside the vestibule. This church is described as a very simple church. 100 years ago, it remains pretty much the same today. See a wide floorboard and the wainscot paneling that separate a couple of rooms that were probably put in at a later date. And one of the things that's very significant of the building is the fact that it's a post and beam building. And the old inside the church that still show the front wall here that show the posts and beams, the whiteboard, the slab and plaster attached right to the exterior stone board. From here, probably 25 feet up the side wall there. You can see the old windows. These were custom made in Fall River by Rich and Davis, a window company at that time. It's a single one-panel door, all handmade. It's only 1 inch thick, about 36 inches wide. Beyond that, it's the only loft we have in the church today. I like this particular view because it's the one view inside the church where you can pick up the posts, the beams, the mortise and tenon joints, the pegs, and you get a feel of what this building was like exactly when it was built 200 years ago. The glass and plastic right up the exterior boards that ran up and down. The rest of the interior of the church is all hinged beyond the beam to that depth and then finished off. From the interior windows, this is a little closet area, we call it the pastor and room. You can see some of the old glass. This glass went in the change in the building at about 1850 when they went from the gallery all the way around and 4 windows to each side, double windows high, to a long single window, and they went from 4 windows to 3 windows on each side. And another interesting point in the same room is the fact that each year or each time, mostly when the painters have been in to do the interior of the church, they've left their mark on a little interior door here that goes in underneath the stairway. That's the entrance to the second floor loft. The earliest date we see on here is 1883, initialed by an ATW and Company, which was an Alley T. Westcott painting company. And we come up 1905, 1930, 1976, and 1994. Henry Eman, now Paul Eman and Sons, did the painting inside the building. Each one has left a mark, and it has some historical significance. It remains very much as it has for the last 140 years. It was in around the 1850s that the building was changed. They took the seating, which is now to the rear of the building, as you see. It changed from having been set so that the front of the church was to the hymnal sign over there, and there was a pulpit window and a hanging pulpit. Anybody in town that's been into the Unitarian church down there, they still have a pulpit hung down, and with a double row of windows, we had a galley here on the side as well as galley on the other 3 sides here. We can still trace today where the original benches were set against what now becomes the platform in the front of the church. And it's interesting that you can still see those marks because most of the interior has not changed. The only changes really that have happened in the last 20 years, even 10 years, we put in some fans, as you have to do in a building like this to keep the temperature, and we've got a count. The chandelier that he's standing up to now was originally lighted with kerosene. That was all converted when they put electricity into the building in 1928. There are signs in the attic, we won't see it today, but there are signs in the attic that at one time they had a fire. Maybe the kerosene lamps were higher up, they had a fire up there and it burned about a 2-foot length through an 8x8 beam. But by the grace of God, the building was spared, and we still have it here again today. In the 1930s, it originally was a non-electric beam. We have to have air to come in and fill up the bellows so that we can get sound from the pipes. It's a pipe organ, a tracker organ. It was originally in the West Congregational Church on Route 44 in Taunton, the West Church, and they donated it to this church in 1930, as I said before, and it's been here ever since. In order to get the pipe, those pipes that you see, the gold colors there, are not real and functioning pipes. The pipes are inside beyond that. But they had to cut out some of the floor because the organ was so small. They went right to the ceiling and they had to cut the floor down. So many of the people have always been cautious about putting heavy loads and a lot of people on that choir, well, we have mostly a choir loft there. And the entrance to the belfry is behind that organ. The lady that plays is Janice McClellan's been playing the church since its reopening in 1950s. 3 and 4, somewhere in there. When she first started, she was getting 50 cents for Sunday for coming in and playing the organ. And she does a marvelous job. She just celebrated her 40th year to renew that she's been playing the organ officially. And even though she doesn't get much more money than that, she's given us a lot of joy and pleasure in her playing for weddings and all activities. Focus out one of the north windows, and we're doing that for a reason. The old glass here has a very ripple effect. Stand across, every image does ripple in there, and again, that's the effect of the old glass. We don't see that. Any glass that came out with effects like that today would be rejected. But in the days when these windows were cast in the 1850s, this was the best that they could get. And you had the blues and purples, and certain times in certain light, you get the different shades of color, as well as the blue thin point of defect in there, or this rippling effect. But to us, it's a very historical point. And as we continue inside the sanctuary here, we pan across the now simple front of the church. We're looking at the pillars, the 2 pillars here, and I pointed out that on one of these you can see where the stovepipe entered years ago that heated this building before they had heat from other sources than wood stove. They had a wood stove in the rear room there and had a stovepipe that ran the entire length of the building into that chimney and then out the roof. They had the other chimney strictly for aesthetics. When they put the heating system in the building in 1900, or they put a cellar in 1909, heating came a bit later. The other chimney became the used one, and they took the top off the left one here, and there's a boiler room down underneath that southeast corner of the building there. Another point in the building inside here is the ceilings, which are now curved, but in 1950, Roy Horton took and staged the entire building in here, and the flat ceiling is then about 100 years old. It got to the point of needing repair, and they completely wire lapped the building there, and they formed a curved or arch ceiling on the sides, and they did a real hard plaster job again in about the 1953 or 4. And since that time to this, all that's needed is a coat of paint occasionally, and it's held up very, very, very well. In the center of the building here at the front is our altarpiece, was made by Milton Babbitt, who lives just across the river in Berkeley. He's a retired antique. He did repairs and restoration of furniture for years. It's got a beautiful cherry top, and we understand that this cherry wood came either from a piece of wood that had been passed down from his great-grandfather, or in fact was a tree possibly on land that they owned over there. And he made this for us about 15, 18 years ago. We call it a credenza. And in the back he's got a drawer and some storage space, and we use it as an altarpiece here. Very nice example of New England craftsmanship. The attic area where all of the framing was built, all kinds of trusses, king trusses and queen trusses, and double rafter trusses, every other one. The rafters are probably 4 feet on center. And he's just going to pan around and try to get us the best view that we can. We're working with the afternoon light. When they took and added on this belfry here, they just took and cut out the roof above, and they brought 4 posts down and bring all of the weight down on existing joists, poles, and beams that were already in here. There are hand-hewn ladders in here that go up to the top. The rope that we had seen previously is that which attaches to the bell and goes clear up to the bell tower and into the belfry. And we're going to attempt to make a trip up there and give you a view on the top of the church. The belfry went on about 1906 or 7. And Jim, to the test, we're up about 60 feet in the air looking out of the east end of the bell tower with the bell to the cameraman's back. You're going to see that in a minute, but you're looking east towards the Cape, across the Berkeley Sonnet area, and it's a beautiful place. Spring, summer, winter, or fall, it's a nice place to come up. We've got the cemetery down below there. It's been there since almost the founding of the church, and we've got New England power lines and the gas company that have recently put in gas lines, but we look right past them. In the fall, it's a beautiful place in here, or up here, and we have to be careful. The belfry here was open completely up until about 20 years ago, and then because of storms and winds and rains getting inside the building, it did quite a job to the underpinnings of this bell that we're going to attempt to show you here in a few moments. It's a bell that was made in Ohio by the Church Bell Company, and more than likely it was brought east by railroad to a point where they were able then to go with horses, carts, or oxen to bring it from the nearest railroad to this point, and then work its way up. Pretty fantastic work when you think about it. For country people, getting a bell up here 55 to 60 feet in the air. Got a new roof on the building not all that many years ago, and we're up at the belfry. We're trying to get a picture of the old bell. This bell probably weighs 1,800 to 2,200 pounds, so we figure it's a ton. And I was explaining to the guys, actually a bell can be run two ways. There's a wooden wheel over here that I made up years ago, had the boys up at the industrial class, carpentry class at the high school make up. It's laminated. Each piece was a copy of the original pieces that had gone the way all wood will go when it's left to wind and water. And we put a new wheel in, and these are pine pieces here with oak spokes. The oak is the original oak that was here. It was only the pine. And this rope is attached to the wheel, and what happens in order to ring the bell, the large rope that we have inside, it will actually rock the bell around. On a Sunday morning when we ring the bell will roll in this cradle, and it moves. And inside, underneath the bell, there is a pendulum that swings, and when it hits the side of the bell, you get this sound, but a lot louder, because we're not going to do it for you quite yet. And then the other hammer down there, you've heard the expression for whom the bell tolls. If you want a tolling bell, which is in rhythm, that hammer would be used there to come up and strike the bell at whatever cadence that you would like to have it struck at. And again, all of these things are preserved here in the belfry. Not seen anymore. We used to be able to look up and see the bell swinging from on the ground, but we know that the building wouldn't have lasted, and the bell wouldn't have lasted as long as it has in this way. A couple other points while we're here. Many years ago, at the reopening of the church in the middle 50s, I'm told that you used to come up and put lights on the arches, the outside arches here of the church, the belfry, and at Christmas time. And at that time, when no leaves were on the trees, they could see the lights from the Blue Hill Observatory in Milton, Massachusetts. And they could see the lights to the Mohawk Bridge between Portsmouth and Bristol. Again, this is a high and a significant point, and we did it ourselves on the way up. We feel like we were going up into the bell tower in the Old North Church in 1775. Had this building been here then, they would have been one that would have gotten signals by way, as all did, by lights strung in the belfries of these old churches. We're just preparing the anniversary celebration called Wedding Revisited, that they have this is coming up on the Saturday afternoon, May 4th, 2 o'clock. And what they're doing is having wedding gowns. I think it's between 16 and 20 gowns in be modeled in somewhat of a mock wedding, but not really a wedding, just a show and a explanation of each of the wedding gowns. As Jim is panning around, you get an idea of the simplicity of the inside of the church. It still remains. Years ago when the church was first built, they had benches. It was only later they put in pews, and it was still later that they put in cushions. They made people sit here for an hour or 2 hours, and if they didn't stay awake, there was somebody come along and poke at them. But today we've got nice soft cushions, and we're able to normally stay awake and refresh for the service. So we've been up on the top, seeing what the view is from the church here. We can only marvel at the construction and those that 200 years ago put this building together, doing it for reasons mostly to carry out the religious freedom. It was one of the many freedoms that came as a result of war with Britain and previous wars, but the desire for people to want to worship in their own situations. And we continue this tradition today. And the Lord's given us a wonderful building and watched over it for 200 years. And for that we thank Him, and we thank you for being a part of coming in and showing some of our wonderful, beautiful buildings.
Well, I'm glad to have you do this because, like you say, that my family has belonged to the church many years ago, and I've learned more in the last half hour than I did all the years that I was over here. So I'm very thankful.
Our pleasure. Sure. Pictures here that we'd like to show you just at the end. We're starting with the oldest picture that we have of the church. It's dated somewhere between 1878 with a wood shingle roof, the windows fully shuttered, the shutters closed. They used to do that just to protect the inside of the building from the sun and the storm. And notice that there's no bell tower on the building, so that way we are able to date the building in the picture from about 1878 to 1905. This picture, next one up here, is one of the church. It says Long Hill Church. That's not the name or a given name. It was known as Elderbrook Meeting House and the West Dighton Church or West Dighton Christian Church or Congregational. But in those days they made postcards of a lot of their pictures, and people could send them away and to friends, whatever. But it shows the new bell tower and the belfry and the weather vane on there. This is a picture, and this house is very similar to the house that the Reed family had, the original homestead, right there at the corner of Horton Street. And this building was on the other end, this is the far end of Horton Street. This was the parsonage. In and about 1905, 1906, this building would become an ill repair, and they had to take it down so that at the time, 1908, the new parsonage appeared in its place, along with the still existing at that time carriage sheds that were here, the church with the bell tower on the top. And we've got a couple of pictures that were taken in 1980. A couple of my workers at the time, we just set staging up on the bell tower up there and up to the front of the church here, and all of a sudden a photographer from one of the Providence papers came by and he said, "Hey, you guys jump up there." They weren't even ready to be doing any work. He got them up on the roof, and but you can see the weather vane and the wooden shingles that were on. Now this was only in 1980, and the metal coverings on the hips of the roof. So they looked like they were holding on, and indeed that's what they were doing, because the staging wasn't even set yet for them to be there. And note here, Ed only has relatives that were raised in Rehoboth, and a cousin of his, Charles, by name Charles only, was dump picking one day in some of the dumps down below the church here many years ago. This man is 61 or 2 today, and he did this while he was a youngster, older than us, and he found what we believe to be a powder horn that was used by the first pastor of this church. His name was Elder Enoch Groff. We call him Elder Enoch Groff, but the EG initials on here. This is a powder horn that they used in those days, Ed probably knows more than I do about it, but the one thing that we can maybe see, maybe not, it's got an inscription here of 1858. In fact, it's later to be pastor of the church was probably called sometime earlier or later than this, even into the Revolutionary War, and might have had to fight. But this was that which they would use to load their muzzles.
Right.
Muzzles.
Powder, black powder.
Okay, and so this is one of the pieces we have. Very much historical significance. And so we're very happy that this was found and we're grateful.